Okay. Zok to Gemara. Trey Arato, Trey Nagar. And what happened was there are two streams, and each stream had a property around it. And these two properties were left to two brothers by a father. And the question here is, one of the brothers had a field adjacent to one of these two properties. So would there be a din? This is not called din of the Bametra. Bametra only applies by a lakeach, but als koifin al midas sedoim, there's no reason why the brother should object to giving his brother the property that's nearest to his property. And he shouldn't be able to say, no, I want half of each of the two properties. So Amarab, in fact, and therefore you have to let your brother take the property that's adjacent to his. It's the same as your property. Why would you call this midas hadoim? There's a very legitimate argument why the other brother should say, I want to split each of these two properties in half, and I want half of each of these two properties. Because in the high matvil, sometimes a little brook, a little creek can dry up. So what are we going to do? What am I going to do if the property that I took, if its brook dried up, but the property that you took, its brook doesn't hasn't dried up? I'll be left with a bad field. So therefore, I'd rather have half of each, and this way at least I'm protected because I'm hedging my bets. Therefore, this is not midas hadoim, and there's a legitimate reason why the brother should want to have part of each field, and therefore he gets to have it. How about if you atati achad nagar? Now you have both fields are adjacent to the same brook, so there's no chance that one will dry up, another one won't. It's exactly, and one of the brothers has an adjacent property. There, Rabbi Yosy would agree that there's absolutely no loss whatsoever to the brother if they give his brother the part of the field that's adjacent to his, and therefore you are koifer there only this thing. I'm going to show you that there is a legitimate reason why I wouldn't want to give you that half of the property. I'd want to separate a different way. And I want the property that's closest to your property, and you can have the property on the other side. So now your property will surround my property. Amar Abaye, this is the ultimate in selfish, osnitzerishkeit, parasitical litva. We'll only say something like that. Matzi Amar, you can say, Bo'ina the apish arisi. I want to force you to have 1 oris for one field and 1 oris for the other field. You know why? Because I could freeload off you then, because I won't need to hire a shomer for my field. You'll have such a staff there, you'll be protecting my field. So the reason why it's midas hadoim, the reason why it's not midas hadoim is because I have a legitimate reason. I want to be able to parasite off you. That's why I want to split you up. So the more of a hilchos Rabbi Yosy. But no, this is still midas hadoim, because afushi lav milsi, to claim that you want to parasite off him, that's not considered enough of a benefit. That's a legitimate reason why you should be able to get the field in the middle. Okay, that suggestion to me sounds like someone scraping his nails on a blackboard. Zok to Gemara weiter. How about chad gisa nagra v'chad gisa nahara? One side had a brook, and I'm going to use this little picture here. One side had a brook, and one side had a river. Of course, a river is much better to have because that's not going to dry up. So if I split it, if I draw the border east-west, meaning I'm splitting the north side from the south side, one side's going to end up, the north side's going to end up with the Nahar, and the south side's going to end up with the brook, and that's not so fair. And if I draw the dividing line in the north-south direction, so now the east side is left merely with a brook, and the west side is left with a north. Not fair either. So to Gemara, how do you do it? Palgan Bekarna Zul, which Taisus learns is a diagonal line. Rashi learns you make it into 8 quadrants, and in each quadrant, each of them get a half. But regardless, they're all going to benefit from both features in the field. Zok the Gemara. The law is attractive. The Mishnah said a mansion, a palace, you can't split up unless Shmoy Alov. Zok Heilige Gemara. Ein dohen kedei lazeh u'chedei lazeh mahu. What if you have a situation where there wasn't enough for each one of the two partners to have 4 amas, right? Because we said 4 amas in a field is the minimum. So is dina the goida igut. Goida igut is similar to what we know as a shotgun clause. If two partners want to break up, one of the typical ways that would be written in a partnership agreement, and I must strongly suggest that anybody who has a partner has a partnership agreement with a shotgun clause, and that is if one partner wants to buy out the other partner, he could make that partner an offer. Whatever that offer is, he can make an offer. And the partner has 2 choices. Either he has to accept that offer, or he has to pay that amount and buy it out. So this way, it simplifies how the partnership would dissolve, because it's very, very fair. It's like when I was a little child and we had a piece of cake that my brother and I had to split up. My mother would say, okay, you're the older brother to my brother, you cut it in half, but Yosy gets first pick, right? So this way, he'll make sure to cut it very, very evenly. So it's the same thing. By creating such a scenario, it makes it very easy. So that could be good. In other words, you buy me out or I buy you out. But it's not quite the same. There's a huge distinction between a shotgun clause and this. And we'll see in a moment what it is. Right. It's called a shotgun vote because either you shoot me or I shoot you. If we're not remaining partners, one of us has to buy the other one out. Okay? Is Ledina the Gaida good? Or if Nachman Amr less Ledina the Gaida good. I can't force you. I have a right to say no. I don't want to buy you out. I don't want you to buy me out. I want to remain partner. So Tosfos here makes the distinction between a shotgun clause and Goida Igut. Is Dina the Goida Igut near Lari? Lafilu bedomim yakarim harbe yoshim mishavyai yachalaimer loy Goida Igut. The wealthier partner has a very big advantage because I can make you an offer that I know you can't afford, and therefore I'll get to keep it if I really want. So I can really force you to sell it to me. But ve'ein lir l'ritzim. Then ken yuchal l'salek echad es chaverei ayda ilu domim. V'chatu shein badin chaluk. All I have to do is offer more money, and then I get it. It's not fair. So therefore, you could only make a shotgun clause of Tosfos if you're offering its fair value. If you're offering its fair value, so normally you might say, well, that's what a shotgun does. It guarantees fair value. Who's going to pay more for something than it's worth? And that's really what its intent is. But let's say you have a very wealthy guy who's trying to corner the market in properties, right? He might overpay for something and put the locals at a disadvantage, which is precisely what's happening now in farmland. China and Bill Gates are buying out the farmland. Why? Because our crazy governments make it so expensive and put so many taxes when farmland is being transferred from one generation to the next. Rarely are these smaller farmers able to afford those taxes, so they're forced to sell. And who are they selling to? To Bill Gates and to China. What effect does that have? It's very, very simple. If you own all the farmland, you control the price of food. And this is happening in real life because anybody, Rahman al-Islam, who needs a new compressor for his air conditioner or his refrigerator or his commercial refrigeration will pay double what he would have paid 3 years ago. Why? Because Bill Gates bought all the compressor manufacturers in North America. So, and the moment he did that, he just doubled the price of the compressors. It's very simple. See, the Competition Bureau is looking for the big things. They're not looking for somebody who controls the compressors. But Bill Gates was smart enough to find something that he can get a monopoly on without the Competition Bureau even noticing. Okay, I didn't even notice it. Tzvi Hirsch with them. Yeah, because he buys a lot of compressors. So we have this machlokes. If I can force someone to get into a buyout or sellout position, Or no, I could say no. I don't want to buy you, and I don't want you to buy me. Suck to Gemara. Amalei Rabbi Rab Nachman. According to you, who I can't force my partner into a sell or buy position. How about a Bacharu Pashut? Shanich Lem Avim Eved Ubehemet. A Bachar and a Pashut. What was left to them? An Eved and Behemet. The Toys asked, now it says, who at dinner could have been two Pashuts. But Bachar Pashut adds a little bit of a dimension of complication. So their father left them an Eved and a Behemet Tameya. Ketadoshin, how exactly are you supposed to split it up? They're going to be in a deadlock position. Because unless one can buy the other out, how exactly you're going to split this 2/3 and 1/3? If it was 50-50, maybe then you could say that we share both, but to share both, and I get 2/3 of the productivity and you get 1/3, it's too complicated. How are you going to deal with a scenario like this? Omer lei, Shani Omer, I'll say, what's the problem? Let them work for one day and for the other 2 days, and that's how you would split it 2/3, but you don't need to have a good scenario. Tosfos mentions that it's a shtickle not fair because it's not like the productivity of 1 day is, let's say, worth $100, and the productivity of 2 days, based on the $100 a day, is worth $200. Rather, the productivity of 2 days would be worth $1,000. Why is that? Very simple. Because let's say it's a chamor we're talking about, a behema. I'm using it to transport. So what do I do with that? I go and I buy a product where it's less expensive and bring it here and sell it where it's more expensive. If you only have it for 1 day, the furthest you can go is a half a day journey. And therefore, you're not going to get such good mitzias. But if you have it for 2 days, you can buy product from so much further away, which will dramatically maximize your profits. So you might think that's not such a fair arrangement. Kamash Malam, that is what Rabbi Yehuda considers fair. Zok to Gemara. The rich get richer. Yeah. Zok to Gemara. What if you have an Evet who's not a full Evet? He was owned by 2 partners. He was an Evet Knaini, owned by 2 partners, and one of his partners freed him. So half of him is a Ben Chern, half of him is an Evet. So the law is Ovid is Rabbi Yoim Echad. He will service his other in 1 day. This Asma Yoim Echad. And 1 day his labor is his own. Divrei Beis Hillel. Beishama Yoimrim Tikantam is Rabbi. You've fixed this scenario for the Adain that never freed his Evet, that he still has an Evet half a day, which is no different than he had up until now. But it's Atol Tikantam. But you're putting the Evet into a very bad scenario. Why? Lisa Shivcha in Yoch. You can't marry a Shivcha because a Ben Yisrael is not allowed to marry a Shivcha. Till he a Kodesh. Lisa Bascharin in Yoch. He can't buy a Bascharin because a Bascharin is not allowed to marry an Evet. So what's going to happen? You vatel. He shouldn't get married at all. Thank you so much. The world was created to procreate. Shenamar lo yisayu bara lo sheves yitzara. The Rebbe didn't create the world to yisayu babayu. The Rebbe created the world to inhabit. Notice the Gemara doesn't ask, how will he be mekayim his mitzvah of peri v'revya? Ella, because we need to resolve this difficult scenario for the Evet to be able to marry. Why does he need to marry? Because he wants to have children. Let me ask you a question. Can he have children not married? It's also a problem. So therefore, Ella, Kaifin, let's see what the Bach says. Ella, where's my Bach? Where is my Bach? Oh, here it is. Ella, Mipnei Tikkun Ha'olam, Kaifin is Rabbi Ba'osin ben Chayrin, and therefore, if we force the Adon, the halfway Adon, to free him, but he doesn't want to, why should he lose the money? Now the Evet who became fully freed, righteous, he has no money now, so he'll write a star, I owe you, whatever the value was that his owner's ownership was worth, and that's what he'll get paid when he has the money. That's what the Evet will pay when he has the money. The Chazru Beis Hillel, the Harish Kediver Bisham. And even Beis Hillel was masking to Beit Shammai that we have to help him get married. So once again, over here you don't have a goida igut scenario. Something popped up on my screen. 1 second. Why don't you do a goida igut scenario? In other words, I could tell the Eved, I'll buy you out for X, or else you have to buy me out for X. Why don't you say that? The agad ika goidika, goid leka. It wouldn't work both ways. Why wouldn't it work both ways? So Rashi, shiny yacha, the agad ika goid leka, ha'eved yacha liknois. Aval einoi omer. We have to see the back to clean up this nusach. Dr. Rashi. Ha'eved yacha liknois atzmoi v'leitze lecheres. The Eved could buy himself and go to Cheres. But the Eved can't say, the Eved can't sell himself. He could go one way. He could buy himself. Let's say he's worth $50,000, so he can pay the other for $50,000. But he can't tell the other to buy him out. Because how could he sell the Chelik ben Chayrin in him? He can't sell himself as an Evet Kanani and make himself back into a full Evet Kanani. So this is a scenario where Goida Igud wouldn't work. Therefore, the only option is to force him to sell, is to force the other into free. So we have a whole lot of kashas over here. So let's skim through Tosfos because it's a very yisodistic Tosfos. So let's see what Tosfos says. So the first thing I want to look at is Shenemer loisoyu bara. Zog Tosfos hadlo maisi krad the puravu. Right. The first question is, why are we working with the pasuk of loisoyu bara? Why not the mitzvah puravu? So Aimer Rivam mishum de lashavis yitzara shayich afilu bitzar abdus. Afilu bitzar abdus bechetche shifra bechetche baschoyin de loikafu es rabba the shachara. So it's opposite. So really, l'shevish yitzara, he could, even the tzad adus, he could be mekayim. So that he has a chiyuv. But a chatzev ben koyen will not have a chiyuv of puravu. I b'chetze shivcha b'chetze b'aschoyen the loy kafu asrabah l'shachara. The only reason why we forced the adon to free the chatzev b'chetze, why doesn't she also have l'shevish yitzara? If it's puravu, you could say she's not mitzvah on puravu. But if it's l'shevish yitzara, she has that as well. El mishum shanagu ba minik hefker. Had leikavva. So you know why we didn't force her? Mishum shavas. The shema afilu kishetasa baschayin loy tekayim. Maybe she won't be mekayim l'shevish yitzara, even if she is free. Mishum deloy mivkeda perivarivna. A woman doesn't have a chiyuv. Kedarim baval yivemta. The itza loy mivkeda perivarivna. Aval eved she ben chayin al korach yichtikayim. That's one reason why. About the Shabbos.
So it's what's got the
because the Shabbos is not a mitzvah on her. We just want to create as many children as possible. That's the it's not a direct chiyuv on the person. It's not on the no, it's not. But when could we tuyoif that there'll be the Shabbos by freeing a man? Because then I'll have the chiyuv for revu. But even if I freed a woman, she doesn't have pruvu, so it might not accomplish the Shabbos. The Shabbos is not a chiv mitzvah on a specific person. It just means that's how the velt's supposed to work. But it doesn't. So we as an oilam want to create a scenario. We mention can help a kinder, but there's not a specific tzivah on her to do. It's not a chiv on the person. I don't think. So the Reese has a different shot. The puravu, yishum the potter who may oisa mitzvah. He's part of a puravu, kiven show others, because he's a nonus. Because what's he supposed to do? He's a half bechayrin, so he doesn't have a mitzvah puravu. In order to put him into a matziv that he would be chayiv in the mitzvah puravu, Like a final rabbi, you don't have to force the Evet to make him a Mechayr. Dim Kain, if you're going to hold that way, then the Cholav of the Knock of Rabbi L'Shachim Kadesh Yisrael B'Chol Mitzvahs. Then every Evet, every Adam should be mechuyev to free his Eved, so his Eved will have the mitzvah for Revu, so he can be Mekayim. Because here that's what we're doing the same thing. We're freeing him so that he will get the mitzvah for Revu, and then he's going to do it. So for Revu you wouldn't do it. Okay, gewaltig. Zok the heilige Tosfos weiter. Fragt us, why kaiven this rabbi? Why can't this Eved marry a Baschorin, or we'll see who he could marry, and he'll be able to have even without becoming a full ben chayrin. How? Am I kaiven? Say the puravu. He's a half yid. On him licked the chiv of puravu. V'yitcha loisa said lo yikadesh. Why can't a yid marry a shivcha? Because of liyakadesh. But if you have an essay, it's a seidach loisa. So why do I have to free him and remove the loisa? Anyway, he will have to do the mitzvah of puravu. Because the mitzvah of Puravu will be done the loisa of Loyia Kaddish. One reason is the Ba'idna, the Me'akar, Lav, Loy Mekayim say. When you're being over the Lav comes with Hara. He's being boiled, a Shivcha. At that time, he's not being Mekayim Dasei. Before we go back to Tosfos, when is the Asay? When do you think the Asay of Puravu is Mekuyim? What? So when the child is born, look what Tosfos says. The Mishas Hara ka'akar lelav v'asei de puravu lo yitekayim at Gemar Bia. At the Gemar Bia is when you're Mekayim the mitzvah. So I think the way they learn in Tosfos is you need a Tanai that there should be a child born. But once a child is born, the Chalois HaMitzvah already happened at the Gemar Bia. I'm not sure the Makbid is halacha. What? If there's no, right, if or it's more than that.
You have to do what you could do. You're not.
No, but the child's winning you Mekayim the mitzvah. You Mekayim the mitzvah by the Gemar Bia, even though the result of the mitzvah didn't come yet. The proof it didn't happen. So that's one reason why you wouldn't say the Chalois. The oid the he asura li nasei loy. Forget him. Someone told me that a yeshiva bacher went over to his mishkiach, and he says, "I have nisyonis. There's girls they want have nisyonis." So the Rebbe told him, "You don't have nisyonis. You have dimyonis. You think they're going to want you." Right? There's a story with a real Yerushalmi from Yisrael with longer pace, and one day he found himself on Rechov Yafoy, and he saw there a woman who was Yafoy. She looked like Chava Koydem Achet, the way they dressed her in a heat wave. So he said, Yetzahara, Bamichas to Shank Poil. Yes, that's to Napoil in my ear. He's convinced me. He's got to convince her. So that's the same thing. Big deal, he's going to want to get married. But what's helped us smear? She won't want it. So Tosfos has a whole bunch of different svaras as to why the Gemara says you have to be clean.
Yeah, you could be something.
I'm sorry?
If she's a shivcha, if she has the mitzvah, you could.
No, we're talking about him marrying a yid. Okay, so let's see the Gemara back there. I'm sorry, we're talking about a marrying a shivcha. You're right, because we want the assay to be doicha the losh of liyakadosh. So that's the right of it. Tashma.
And what's the problem?
The problem is he won't be able to marry unless we free him in Gansen. He won't be able to find someone to marry him.
That's what. The zweite reason is as
she won't want to marry him. She might not want to marry him.
As his mitzvah can't push away her is. What's her is? She's not. He doesn't have a
I guess she's not allowed to marry a shivcha. Is not allowed to marry a Yisrael. But she's also mechuyev in mitzvah. She wouldn't be allowed to marry Yisrael. Okay, so let's see the Gemara about it. Tashma. Shnei achin, echad ani ve'echad asher. There were two brothers. One was a poor brother and one was a rich brother. V'niach lehem avian merchatz, a bathhouse, ubeis abad, or a press, Also, l'schar, if it was a press and a bathhouse that you normally rent out, you lease out, and there's a monthly income, so then a schar le'emt. So they would split the income. But also la'atzma, what if it wasn't rented out? It wasn't designed to be rented out. He had it to use himself. It was personal. So then, Hare Asher Aimalani, the Asher could tell the Ani, you might not have many olives to press, and you may not have the luxury of kratzing around the mikveh. But the rich guy can tell the poor guy, Kach lecha avodim, turning on top of base, buy yourself avodim. What's the purpose of the avodim? Sheyachamamu oisoi, to warm it up. Because if you own a mercha, it's like owning a boat. It's very expensive. The upkeep is very expensive. So I could say, yeah, you'll have to get your own people to service it for you. And then you can sit there watching the merchats. You don't have oil, olive, get olives. And then go crush them. And Rashi says the punchline. The only can't say, listen, I don't have much benefit because I don't have the ability to use these resources. So buy them from me. Pay me half. I don't have a right to demand that the usher should buy me out. Dr. Gemara, there as well. It's not a right that you don't say good or igud, because hasamami good ika, agud leka. Why is there agud leka? Because the ani doesn't have the option to buy half of it from the usher. He simply doesn't have the money. The Greishain ani oimer loy. Afani ekne chelkach. Shein leva meliknais. Fichach and yochalakoy. Tashma. Zakla. Kol she'ilu yichalek u'shmoyel. Right, that's what our Mishnah says. Anything that if you split it, it'll maintain its name, its identity. Rashi says what that means is kol davar sheyesh by shir shim techalkenu adayin ye'elov shmoyel rishon. And then you split it. In lab, what do? Malin oison bedomim. Then you assess it, and one guy buys the other one out. Isn't that precisely what Goy de Ogud is? So, frankly, Gemara, it's Shaver on Reb Nachman. Reb Nachman said, you don't say Goy de Ogud. We have our Mishnah says black and white. You say Goy de Ogud. So, Gemara, we're going to have to say that it's a machlokes tonight. And although Reb Nachman's psak that you don't say Goy de Ogud is not consistent with our Mishnah, it will be consistent with the Tana that we're about to come. The Tanya we look. Toilato shir bani pachas. What happens if there was a chutzner that didn't have 8 amas, and because of that, I can't force you to split it with me, but I want to split. So maybe I could say, you know what? There's only 7 amas. You take 4, so you'll get your chelik. You'll get a good chelik. If there was 8, I could force you to take 4. So there's only 7. Take 4. I'll take 3. Bani pachas. The loch is shaymin loy. You listen to him, and you could force it. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel ain't shaymin loy. No, I don't have the way to enforce that. What exactly is the case? If it's exactly as said, my time with Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. Why in the world would Rabbi Shimon Gamliel not allow that? I'm allowed, as long as you're getting your 4, why can't I demand that we're going to split? Doesn't make sense. Elolav, it must be there's more here than meets the eye. Elolav chisur mechsur avachi katani. There must be more going on. Vachi kamar. Toilata. Shear. You take the shear of 4. Bani pachas, and I'll only take 3. Shaymin loy. Everybody agrees. Sai, the Tanakama, and Sai Reb Shimon agrees that you could do that. Where's Reb Shimon ben Gamliel arguing? The Goydei Agud. What about a time of Goydei Agud, which you buy me out or I buy you out? Nami Shaymin loy. The Tanakama holds Shaymin loy. But also Reb Shimon ben Gamliel Lememar ain't Shaymin loy. So here we have the machlokes between the Tanakama and Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. Reb Nachman will hold like Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. It's not speaking about a case of Goydei Agud. It's only speaking about a case where I'm telling you, you take 4, I'll take 3. You're going to ask with the comment, my time with your Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. Why would Reb Shimon ben Gamliel object to that? I'm making a concession. You're getting your fair share. Because the Mekabel, the guy who's going to end up with 4, is going to say, Ibidami, Lasli Dami. If you want me to buy you out and get that extra half an amma that I'm entitled to, I don't have the money to do it. Now you want to give it to me by matana? I don't want to accept the matana. So that's why I have a right to object, even to get 4, because I don't want the freebie and I can't afford to buy it, and therefore I can object. But you have no array at all regarding the Charlotte Goyda Igud. Right? I think the Brisker Rav once said, the cheapest way to pay for something is with money. Zok the Gemara weiter. Amalei Abai Rabbi Yosef. Ha, the Rabbi Yehuda, the Shmuel. This halacha that Rabbi Yehuda said that you do say Goyda Igud is actually following along in his Rebbe Shmuel's Shita. The Tanan we learned, the Kisvei HaKodesh. This is the very end of our Mishnah. Kisvei HaKodesh, Afal Pisha Shneim Roitzim, even if we want to cut the Sefer Torah in half, I'll get Reish Shmois and half of a Yikra, you'll get the other half of a Yikra by Midbar and Dvarim, and we'll split it in half. Nevertheless, Loyach Loiku, you don't cut Svarim in half. V'yomar Shmuel, and Shmuel made a comment on our Mishnah, and this is what he said. Loishanu ela b'krach echad. When do you say you don't cut a Torah in half? If it was one big scroll. Aval b'shnei krichos. What if the Torah was split into 2 scrolls? Then chalkin, then we would be able to split it, that you get one scroll and I get the other scroll. Frag the Gemara, v'sol kedaitech less dina the Goyda Igud. If you hold that you don't hold of Goyda Igud, Shmuel's halacha wouldn't make sense. In other words, Shmuel must hold that you do say Goyda Igud, like Rabbi Yehuda said. Why? Because in my area, bekrach echad, afilu b'shnei krichanami, even by 2 krichan as well, we have a problem, because you cannot say Goyda Igud by splitting, by you taking one scroll and me taking the other scroll. That's not called Goyda Igud, because I'm completely losing your scroll and you're completely losing my scroll. Goyda Igud would mean that I'll pay you and I get both scrolls, or you pay me and you go both scrolls. But since Shmuel is saying that by Shnei Krichas Cholkin, it's a raya that you don't say Goyda Igud. Zogt Gemara, Zogt Rashi, Micholkin, because Zogt Daidach, that filu ain't staying margin. The Al Karchach ain't the man Shavin, they're not alike. The 2 scrolls are not alike. The last din of the Goyda Igud, Heichu Kaifeyu. How could I force you to take one scroll and me take another scroll? Zeh Yoimar. One will say, Ani lo yetin loch, oidef adamim. Right? Even if you split the scrolls in half, one's for sure going to be worth more than the other. They won't be worth exactly same to the penny. And one guy can say to the other guy, I don't want to pay you the extra. And I'm not willing to give you the nicer one that I will get from you money. And therefore, overlay us into Tavai Tzrichin High. So it's not correct what I said, which is later in the Gemara. But it's impossible that these 2 scrolls should have exactly the same value. So once again, there's going to be some compensation. And the halach is I can force you to split.
So Yosy, what are we saying? That Megillas Esther is worth more than Megillas Eicha? More people would pay because it's fancier? Is that Kisvei Kodesh?
Every scroll would have a different value to it. Not because it's fancier. One's bigger. There's different sizes.
Twice every year.
No, ask Shmuel. Megillas Esther has more value because it's just more in demand. I don't think there's any intrinsic value inside one or the other.
It doesn't make a difference. They don't. If you put them all for sale, they're not all going to be the same cost. So we can't just say you take one and I take the other, because they don't. It's impossible that they should all have exactly the same price. That might be a bit mixed. We're talking about how much someone will pay for it. It's value in the market. It's impossible that they should be exactly alike. So therefore, my year bekrach echad afilu b'shnei krichanami, and therefore, if you don't say Goyda Igud, then by shnei krichan, how can you force them to go that way? Maybe when Shmuel said "Aval b'shnei krichas cholkin," he didn't mean I could force you to go one way, me go the other way. Not force. If we both agree to do it that way, then we could do it. So therefore, we thought we would have a raya that Shmuel holds of Goyda Igud, because I could force you to take one scroll and me take the other scroll, and I could pay you the difference. However, it's not a raya because maybe Shmuel only said as halacha when both people agree. Amar Mema. Hilchasa, Ameir said the halacha is dina the Goyda Igud. Amalei, Reb Ashi la Meimar, Reb Nachman Mai. What about Reb Nachman? Did he not say that you don't take Goyda Igud? Amar Lei, So a member answered, Loy Shemili, I didn't hear Rab Nachman's psak. Kloimer, Loy Svirli. I don't hold of it. I disagree. I disagree with Rab Nachman. I hold that you do say Goydai. Fact more of a loy. Are you telling me my member doesn't hold of it? For Rav Bar Chinna, Rab Dimi Bar Chinna, Rav Bar Chinna, Rab Dimi Bar Chinna, Shavak Lu Avua, Tarti Amhosa. Their father left them over 2 maidservants. I can't say the joke that I'm thinking about on this particular case. One of these maidservants, Chada Yoda Afi Uvashuli. One knew how to bake and cook. She was an excellent cook, but she didn't really know how to do pilcha. She knew how to spin and weave. Thank you. Chad Yoda Pilcha v'navla, and the other one knew how to spin and weave. She could make big oven. So they each had a different skill set. But also the Kamei de Rava. They came to Rava. How are we going to split up this Yerusha? And he was told, less dina the guy day agud. He said, there's no din of guy day agud. So you're gonna have to share them both. So Adrabah, you see like Rab Nachman, not like Rab Yehuda. The Gemara shiny awesome. Dilamar mi boyle tervayu. Ulamar mi boyle tervayu. We couldn't split it up because we each needed both. So Kika Amalei, Shkoil at Chada, Pano Chada, that lav good yogutu. That is not good yogut. Zokt Rashi. Where are we up to? No, there is no Rashi. There is Rashi. One second. Let's the good Rashi. Lekaifai, Losses, the Meya Eitfin, the Yafa, Veloy Limkar Chelk. I'm sorry?
A weaver or a cook, eine für das kost mehr, eine für das Kusche mit der.
Well, they're probably worth a little different on the market. But the problem is, if you say go to Igud, then I should say I'll pay you and I'll get both, and you pay me and you get both. Go to Igud would say don't split it up. You only say split it up that way if you can't say go to Igud. But if you can say go to Igud, each one required the skills of both those people. So what did Rabbi say? Rabbi says there's no din of go to Igud, meaning I don't have a right to force you to sell, or you could force me to sell. Rather, we have to split a different way. Why is that? They both need it. So that wouldn't be goy de because if it was goy de then I would be able to buy you out completely. Or
we could divide and pay out the rest.
Right, so that's not goy de Goy de means I could force you to give me the whole thing.
Why that? What? But
that's not goy de means I have a right to get everything. That's the whole word of goy de I have a right to force you to sell me your chelik. The less brerak, you can't force me to sell, and I can't force you to sell. So we can split it that way, and then someone has to pay the difference. But at the end of the day, goy means I can force you to buy, I can force you to sell or to buy the whole thing. Everybody needs both halakim. Yet, how come you don't say goy de Yehuda? Why did it say goy de Igud? Which is a kasha the Gemara asked earlier. Why can I force you to sell your chelik so I can have both scrolls? The Gemara, that's not fair because our Gemara Absalom b'sharatzu. But Avada, if they didn't want to split, Rabbi Yehuda holds Avada. I could force a goy de Igud. I can say either I'll pay you and I get both, or you pay me and you get both. But here they're agreed. If they agree, then they can do whatever they want. Tander Abada. Now we're getting into the halachas of how to make svarim, how to be karech svarim. Tander Abada. Madlik Adam Torah Nevi'im Uksuvim Ke'echad Divrei Meir. You're allowed to have one massive scroll of all of Tanakh. So we have massive scroll. We have those in bound versions, but you're allowed to make a scroll. Divrei Meir. Read on Meir, no. Torah b'fnei atzma, Nevi'im b'fnei atzman, Uksuvim b'fnei atzman. The Chachamim Maimerim, even more, call echad ve'echad b'fnei atzman. If I'm not mistaken, we do call echad ve'echad b'fnei atzman, right? Every novi is a separate scroll. We don't put them into one big scroll. The Omer of Yehuda, Maisa bebitus ben zubin.
When he says kol echad ve'echad means
Every individual sefer. Right. Call sefer v'sefer shel neviim v'shel ksuvim tzarich liyos krach la'atzmi. Rashi says.
So then do they have different values? So Shmuel is worth more than Treyasar?
Could be, yeah, but we're not discussing Yerusha anymore. We're discussing how these things should be prepared.
No, I understand. But the reason it's being prepared is because so they should avoid machloikis, Yosy. What do you think?
No, it's not because of that. It's out covered as svarim. It's not one man does not covet that the Torah should be together with Navi B'Ksuvim. The Torah should be separate. So each one has.
Don't you remember the eyeball story?
that Steinberg said over. Steinberg said over the story. Eyeball. That's right. What word did he change? Do you remember what word he changed? You remember what word he changed? You remember? Toby, were you there when Steinberg spoke? And the guy changed the word in the story. That was also a good story, right? They had to decide who's getting the money and who's getting that. So that's Gemara. Ma'aser bebitus ben zoynim. The Sefer Torah was from Ezra, but the question is which word? Vavatem. He changed to an I instead of an aleph. Okay. So what happened was, Ma'aser ben zoynim. He would read the Joylo Shmoyne Neviim Midubokim Ke'echad Al Pira Belazar Ben Azai. He had 8 of the 8 Neviim, called Sefer Neviim. There's 8 Sefer Neviim. He had them on one big scroll, and it was approved by Rabbi Elazar ben Azai. V'yashar, there are those who say, no, that's not the story. The story is each Novi was separate, like we have it, like the Chum said. Amar Rabbi said, Ma'aser be'viu lefanenu Torah Neviim Ksuvim Midubakim Ke'echad. There was a time where they brought in front of him Tanakh, one big volume, one huge scroll. V'yachsharnum. I'm sorry. It would be very heavy. V'yachsharnum, and they were mashrit. So that's a raya that you could make them all together. So that would go like the first shita. So there's a machlokes what the story was that happened, depending on if you hold like a mayor, Rabbi Yehuda, or the Chacham. Period. Bein chumash lechumash shel Torah. When you finish one chumash, you finish Vayikra, you're going to Bamidbar. Arba shitin, you have to leave 4 empty lines. Uvein kol v'chein bein kol novi l'novi, between each novi, you have to leave 4 lines. And then uvenovi shel shnei moser, by treyosar, where there's 12 small neviim wrapped into one scroll, gimel shitin, you only need 3 lines of blank space in between each navi. Umisayim milamata umaschel milamayim. And what you're allowed to do is, let's say you ended one navi at the bottom of one amud, you don't have to wait 4 lines on top, or 3 lines on top to start a new navi. That you would be able to start right at the top. As Rashi says, in Nizdamaloi Sima Sefer Milamata, B'Seif Hadaf, Mas L'Sifra Acher, B'Reishataf. You don't have to leave those 4 lines. Assuming you're allowed to, like the first shita, but if somebody wanted to do that, so the law is medabek, you could do it. However, you have to understand, if you're rolling it up from the front to the back, so there's going to be a wooden amud there. You don't want to wrap words around that amud. So there has to be enough cloth there that you didn't write on, so you could roll it. Now that amud is completely wrapped in unwritten parchment. And then when you roll further, you can start rolling up the parchment. No, with sci-fi, but on the back end, where it's a much bigger circumference, kedei logo hekef. You have to have enough of blank space, so a blank that can go once around the whole thing.
Really, both sides are going to want to be.
Well, so Frek Chaim, it all depends on how you normally leave it. Your Megillah, do you keep it by the Hibbe ready to lane it from new, or do you leave it just the way you finished laning at the end? You usually miss it back. Right? So Frek Toisus on Rashi, the way Rashi is learning, it's mashma that you're going to have it all the way at the end. When you keep it to store, you're going to keep it all the way at the end. Frek Toisus, but that's not true. Normally, we keep it all the way at the beginning. So if we keep it all the way at the beginning, it's punkt bekeret. Then it's punkt bekeret. That at the beginning you should need the extra cloth because the beginning's got to go around the whole thing, not at the end. So Toisus actually flips the girsa and says it's exactly the opposite. Right? If you're going to keep it at Bereshis, right, that means the first cloth is wrapping around the whole thing. We want the final wraparound not to have any words on it. So then you need it bigger at the beginning.
You may on the sector, you do on both.
The Sefer Torah is not an issue because there's two amudim and you leave it in the middle. We're talking about if there's only one amud and there was one big scroll like a Megillah.
Look at this.
Oh, that's because we're talking about there's only one amud. That's correct. I'm sorry. Yeah, we're talking about one amud. So we're speaking about if there's only one amud. If there's only one amud, then Tosha says, where Rashi says doesn't make sense. It has to be the opposite. Umesai milamata umascha milamayla. Zogt the mish or the price of it. And if you want, you can cut it, which is a very big problem. My karma, what you're talking about? We already said that it's better to separate each novi and not have them together. So what do you mean? My karma, you know why you could be maschel milamayla and you don't have to leave any extra space? Because the balt, we want you to separate them. When you cut it, imagine if you left 4 lines. So it'll look very funny. If I started 4 lines down. So since you want to cut it, since we would encourage you to cut it, when you cut it, we want at least a new scroll to start all the way on top. You're not going to have any space. You're not going to have any extra space. I'm not sure how that works. Okay, so we'll stop here. We'll be back tomorrow. So tomorrow we're going to learn exactly how you have to wrap up the Sefer Torah.
Person put it all together. He didn't write them separately.
Well, you can't write the whole thing in one shot. You write them page by page.
No, and but I'm saying is, you said before, like Sforum, there comes to you, like the puzzle.
Right.
Right. So in this case scenario, that you
you're not supposed to cut a sefer or not, but you're allowed to cut in between. Right. So if you have 2 neviim, you're allowed to cut to separate Shmuel from Melachim. That's what it means. Okay, gewaltig.
Yosy, thank you.
So tomorrow we're going to learn about how much to leave. We're going to learn about how big a Sefer Torah has to be, how thick it has to be. It'll be very interesting. It's a very interesting stickle. We're also going to learn. The Gemara is going to say that somebody wrote 70 Sefer Torah. So the Gemara is going to answer. He maybe he wrote Torah Tziva Lodem Moshe 70 times. There's no way he wrote 70 Sefer Torah. So the Gemara goes into that. Okay, have a wonderful day. So we're talking about the